Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat. I am so excited to introduce today's guest to you. Lindsay Edimatapur is someone that I've been following on Instagram for several years now. She is a holistic herbalist as well as the founder of Simbi. She's known on Instagram and on TikTok for Wellness with Linz. And it's such an honor because I have been following Lindsay for many years now. So it was a lot of fun to be able to sit down with her and discuss her personal wellness journey, what it was like for her navigating diagnoses in her adolescence and early 20s, how she eventually really took initiative in her health journey and taking on more of an alternative, more holistic route. And you'll leave this episode feeling really inspired to take, authority in your own journey. And, we talk about balance. We talk about her journey to founding Simbi and what that's been like for her. And she discusses a little bit more about herbalism and, what her teas include and how to use them most effectively and so forth. So it was a lot of fun to be able to sit with her one-on-one and ask questions and get to know her a little bit more. And I'm certain that you will also enjoy this conversation. So thank you so much for being here, and please help me welcome Lindsay to the table and let's eat. Today, I think you're going to love Lindsay. You're going to love this episode. She just has so much value, so much to share, and I'm so grateful that she took the time out of her schedule to sit down with me and have this conversation. So thank you so much for being here, and please help me welcome Lindsay to the table and let's eat. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, holistic health coach and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the exact location where optimal wellness lies. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, gut health, mental health, and more. I am so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you became a holistic herbalist and the founder of Simbi.
Yeah, so my story kind of goes back to when I was in middle school. My dad was diagnosed with a liver disease, and
Okay.
doctors kind of just told him, like, we can give you medication, but it might not do that much. They basically gave a very, like, vague diagnosis.
Okay.
And he decided, he has 3 kids, he has a wife, he has a life, like, he
Yeah,
needs to figure this out. And he
sure.
was originally kind of like the catalyst in our family and in my life that led me to herbalism because he started diving into it. And I would come like downstairs or whatever after getting home from school, and he would have like pots of tea brewing. He had like
Yeah.
containers of reishi, all this stuff just all over the kitchen. And as a seventh grader, I was like, this smells bad. Like, what are you doing? Like, I understand like you're trying to like heal your liver, but like this
Yeah.
really smells and tastes bad. And kind of like going from there, like in high school, I kind of dabbled a little bit. And then when I got to
Okay.
college, I hit kind of like a breaking point in my health. And that's when I was like, okay, I've tried a lot of things. I've tried a lot of diets. I've tried a lot of medications. I've tried a lot of supplements, but why haven't I addressed like what
Yeah.
my dad introduced to me at like a young age?
Sure.
And so that's kind of how I originally got into it.
Okay.
I come from a background of autoimmune health and from just not really getting the help that I needed or
Sure.
wanted from the Western medicine system. And
Sure.
so when I finally kind of hit, I'd say my breaking point when I was in my early 20s,
Yeah.
I kind of went back to the basics. And one of those things for me was herbalism. And it really changed the trajectory of my health, of my life, of my career, and
Sure.
everything. But that's kind of how we got to like where I am today with running Simbi and just being, healthy, which is something I never thought I could be.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. And what a core memory. It sounds like seeing your
Yeah.
dad. Like, what is going on here? It smells bad. Did he have
Yeah.
success in that journey with his disease?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
he was able to completely reverse what he was dealing with, which was
Amazing.
amazing because that's not what he was told by doctors. And that what he did for his liver kind of brought me to what I originally addressed in my body as well when I was in my early 20s, which was liver health. And
Mhm.
um, a big portion of that for me was figuring out like how can I address this in a way that I'm not, having to deal with really intense teas or kind of like detox protocols. Like, how can I
Sure.
do this in a way that isn't gonna make me go through those symptoms? Which
Hmm.
is what then led me to studying herbalism and going from there.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's amazing. So you're speaking a little bit about, your own health journey and whatnot. I'm curious to know more about that specifically, and then
Mhm.
also in the lens or through the lens of Western healthcare. And I know you share a lot about this on Instagram, so I would love for,
Yeah.
the audience to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, so I grew up kind of like a poster child for chronic illness.
Mm,
I had just a wide range of symptoms, and it got to a point where I was around 10 that my mom was like, okay, this isn't normal. Like my
yeah,
doctor kept saying, like, oh, it's growing pains, like she's just growing up, it's what happens.
yeah,
And finally, my mom got to a point where she's like, this isn't normal. Like
sure.
you shouldn't be like sitting out of sports like twice a week. You shouldn't be coming home from school like multiple times a week. I was missing like 30 days of school a
Oh
semester.
my goodness.
And we were getting just like, notes from the Massachusetts State
Yeah,
Board or whatever it was every single month. And so we started kind of going through the doctors, going through the specialty systems. One thing we learned, and one thing that I learned throughout my whole like process of going through doctors up until being a young adult, was that doctors view things through their lens and their
yeah,
specialty, and they
yeah,
don't view the body holistically. So
sure.
when you go to them with a range of symptoms, when you have stomach issues, neurological issues, chronic pain, joint issues, like they're saying, okay, one's rheumatology, one's
Yeah,
GI, one's neurology,
mm,
and there's no one that really looks at the body holistically. And I
sure.
think it's why with a lot of autoimmune diseases and a lot of chronic illnesses, people get bumped around so much, and it takes like on average, I believe it's 7 years to get an autoimmune diagnosis.
Wow. Yeah,
And I experienced that myself.
sure.
And so we started kind of going through that process with doctors, and eventually I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm.
And come to find out, like 10 years later, the doctor had misread my tests, and I did not have juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, but I had lupus.
Oh my
And it
goodness.
was very like evident in the blood work.
Sure.
Because with lupus, like sometimes it can be subjective. People
Yeah.
can do the autoimmune panel and it can come back like normal, but they still have symptoms and they have lupus. But
Sure.
I had all of the positives for like lupus markers as well as the symptoms.
Okay.
And so I think for me, like over the course of from the time I was 10 to like 22, when I got the correct diagnosis,
Oh my God.
I
Wow.
was just, yeah, I was in and out of so many doctors' offices. And oftentimes the response was like, okay, well, we can give you an anti-inflammatory, we can give you a steroid or an immune modulator, but you're going to have to take this for the rest of your life. Like essentially, if you start now as a kid, like you're going to have to take this forever.
Mm.
And like when you're in seventh grade and
Sure.
you're being diagnosed with this, or actually, wait, I think it was in fifth grade, but you're just kind of going with the flow. At that point in
Sure.
time, I
Yeah.
was still a kid, and it took me until I got to high school to really start kind of second guessing the people who were
Yeah.
supposed to be kind of helping me through this.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why, like now, I talk about the Western medicine system a lot because there's a lot of things that need to be done
Yeah.
work-wise within it. And if we can't really reform that ourselves, at least I can help others navigate it in a way
Sure.
that is more effective than
Yeah.
just kind of doing what I did, which was spending 10 years bumping in and out of it and trying to figure out like what exactly was going on. And I
Sure.
think like now, and I'm seeing this too on social media with other people, like
Yeah.
it's good because people are sharing kind of like their toolkit with dealing with Western medicine doctors and trying to
Yeah.
just navigate it in a better way.
Yeah. And just being more informed. I love that you brought up the fragmentation that takes place when it comes to seeing specialists, like you're saying, the process itself taking so long, but
Hmm.
just the neglect that goes into understanding the reality that our body is interconnected and
Hmm.
we're simply not existing in a healthcare system that is acknowledging that. So
Yeah.
for your sake, it sounds like you're empowering others to consider those pieces, right, to the
Yeah.
puzzle. And it's not out of spite or out of we should, boycott Western healthcare or
Hmm.
anything of that
Yeah.
nature. It's just simply their belief system was disruptive to your health journey,
Hmm.
clearly. And it was
Yeah.
your own self-education and research and so forth that allowed you to get to where you are now.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the times on social media, especially, like people really bash Western
Hmm.
medicine.
Hmm.
And I have so many qualms with it and how the systems are set up in place. But I think that there are ways to navigate it where
Sure.
you're utilizing the Western medicine system. Because at the end of the day, like it is a system. It's
Yeah.
not holistic medicine. We're not looking at the body as a whole. We're not looking at preventative medicine. So like within those confines, how can we still use the system? And for me, and kind of like navigating my health in my early 20s, one of the best things that I did, and what I tell literally everyone is if you're dealing with a range of symptoms because you have an autoimmune disease or you think you have one or a chronic illness or whatever it is, try to isolate those symptoms to the
Mm-hmm.
doctor you're speaking with because I think for so many years I saw like rheumatoid doctors but
Sure.
I was having severe GI issues or I was having severe neurological issues. And it wasn't until my early 20s when I just separated them completely and just didn't really tell them. Like if I was
Sure.
seeing a GI doctor, I didn't really say like, oh, well, also I've been having like these migraines or
Yeah.
these nerve pain in my body. Like I just focused on the GI side of things. And that was what led me to actually like get a different diagnosis from each
Yeah.
doctor, which ultimately like kind of all fell under the umbrella of lupus, but it
Sure.
allowed me to get the healing or like at least the acknowledgement that helped me find the healing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I try to emphasize to others who are dealing with it is to just isolate your symptoms because
Yeah.
if you don't play by their system, you're not going to find like success within their system. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think to your point of, utilizing the Western healthcare system because that's what we have access to,
Hmm.
and also acknowledging that this is their training and
Yeah.
and respecting the fact that it's just simply not embedded in the way that they operate. It's not like they have
Yeah.
malintent here or anything of that
Hmm.
capacity. It's just this is just how they were formally trained. So we can't
Yeah.
expect them to offer us something that they just quite frankly were not given the tools to support us with.
Yeah.
And I think we are progressing in a lot of ways, and I think
Hmm.
you could probably speak to this too, just seeing on social media now. There are boundaries and there are areas that I think we need to be very cautious of when it comes to
Hmm.
the experts that we see now
Yeah.
on social media trying to heal everyone. But I think we
Yeah.
are feeling a little bit more empowered
Hmm.
collectively to feeling better because we're just not getting the answers that we're looking for, you
Yeah.
know?
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more specifically. You spoke on lupus. I know you have a journey with PCOS and some other health
Hmm.
issues. I'd be curious, just to hear a little bit more about what that has been like and how maybe their interrelatedness of them. I know,
Yeah.
your thyroid as well. So please
Hmm.
just share on that a little bit.
Yeah. So, like I said, I was misdiagnosed with rheumatoid when I was younger, and I didn't get the lupus diagnosis until I was 23. I think it was 23. And between that time period, I had developed a lot of cycle related symptoms to menstrual health symptoms. And so when I went through my first period when I was 14, I think is when I started, I had just severe pain with it. And to the point where like I was passing out in class. I was just throwing up from the pain. I couldn't
Mm.
like, if I was at home, I could sleep for like 50 hours straight
Oh
just
my
from my
goodness.
body being exhausted from dealing with it.
Sure.
And my mom had endometriosis. She had a lot of complications, and the doctors kind of, the GYN kind of chalks it up to, okay, we know you have PCOS because at 15 you have, cysts on your ovaries, your blood tests are positive, you have high androgens, that type of thing. And then we think you have endometriosis, but there's not really anything we can do except for give you birth control. And I was like 15, I think, when I started birth control. And
Okay.
that, I think, played a huge role in my health deteriorating over the next
Mm.
years. Just because like it would work for a few months, then it would stop working. They'd up the hormones. Like there was a point where it got to I was only like menstruating, but not actually, like every
Yeah.
6 months. And that got to a point of not working. And then she suggested a shot once a year, which would just make it so that you're not ovulating at all.
Mm.
And that at that point, I was kind of like, okay, like that seems a little weird. And I
Yeah.
remember asking her, like, okay, well, I did some research, which doctors love to hear.
Oh, yeah.
Like I did some research and I'm a little bit concerned. Like,
Sure.
when you're stopping ovulation using hormones for a period of time, like there are connections to infertility later in life. And
Sure.
she was first, she discredited what I said. And she was like, well, that research like isn't really that serious. There's research showing it the other way. And also like you already have PCOS, you or have suspected endometriosis, you're probably going to have to deal with infertility anyways.
Yeah.
So like it's not really a huge worry.
Right.
I remember hearing that and just being like, whoa, what? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's such a
Yeah.
casual thing to say to like I think I
Of
was 16
course.
and a half at the time. And at that point in time, I was like, okay, well, I am not going to do that. I'm not going to take the shot just because of how you're reacting around it and how I feel about it. And I continued on for like another 6 months, I think, until that's like when I started really looking into birth control and the side effects that we could see at that point in time.
Sure.
And so I got off birth control and I proceeded to, have ongoing issues with that, as well as contracting mono when I was 18.
Okay.
And that stayed in my system for the next like 4 years, which
Mm.
there's a really direct tie between EBV and lupus. So
Okay.
I kind of believe that having that virus when I was 18 really activated my lupus symptoms
Okay.
because at that point in time, I just felt like I couldn't get better going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
And there were other, the thing is, like, my story, I got so many diagnoses over
Yeah.
the years. Like, I was diagnosed with PCOS, I was diagnosed with hypothyroid, Hashimoto's,
Mm.
GI, autoimmune disease, all of these things. And it's like really, it would be really time consuming to go over all of it, I
Yeah.
think. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, I do believe that at the root of kind of the real flare of my health hormone wise and autoimmune wise was that EBV virus that I
Sure.
had. And so kind of learning more about that relationship and the relationship between viruses and things like lupus and autoimmune diseases or things like Hashimoto's disease and kind of the relationship there. That's kind of like what set me on the path
Okay.
to actually finding healing. I think for a
Yeah.
long time, because I had that misdiagnosis,
Sure.
I was kind of targeting the wrong thing. And
Yeah.
so I was able to kind of move forward, assess, look at, the HPA axis, your
Mm.
nervous system, how that affects autoimmune diseases and
Sure.
hormone related like conditions and kind of like this big circle of them being interconnected.
Yeah. 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 That's incredible because I think through our healthcare system, all of these specific diagnoses, whether or not there was legitimacy to them or not, they
Yeah.
would never be looked at in what you're saying in terms of just their connectedness and how there's
Yeah.
overlap and so forth. So unfortunately, it is up, sounds like, in your case, it was up to you to kind of make that connection through your own research. And hopefully we
Yeah.
continue to acknowledge that, relationship, because otherwise we're not going to see healing. Most people are
Yeah.
suffering, especially within the world of thyroid health and
Hmm.
hypothyroid. I mean, so many people are underdiagnosed or walking around
Yeah.
should be diagnosed and they're not, that's
Yes.
that's a huge, huge thing that I see too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, when it comes to the world of like holistic healing and
Hmm.
health, a lot of the times I feel like I don't know how to say this appropriately, but like we almost overcomplicate the
Mm,
healing side of things. And I think um, my background was kind of unique, and I was approaching, 5 different things that I needed to find a solution for.
yeah,
But I think that a lot of people, or a lot of women that I talk to, if they're just dealing with something like hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, or something within under that like hormone umbrella,
sure.
there's really so much you can do outside of the more hyper extensive
Yeah.
side of healing. Just because, like, I know for me, even though I had a lot going on, I tried so many things and I spent so
Mm,
much money on different types of testing, different protocols, different
mm,
like detoxes.
yeah.
I think that if we don't fundamentally have just, the pillars for
Yes.
like healthy living in place, it's going to be hard to actually like find healing from something. And
Yeah.
for me, I know from the point I got the lupus diagnosis, I had one relapse between then and now, and it was just like a year and a half later. And it was because I didn't have those pillars in place. I was
Mm,
focused on, making sure my gut health was happy. I didn't have any like H. pylori or bacterial
sure.
overgrowth, or just focusing more on that and the like mineral depletion,
Yeah.
but I was ignoring things like basically like things like sleep
Yeah.
or being outside in nature every single
Yeah.
day.
Right. Right.
Um, so I think those things are really important when it comes
Sure.
to kind of like talking about this side of healing too.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate that so much. I think that people, because it seems so simple, I think a lot of times will just overlook it and they think that they need to go far beyond
Mhm.
that, but they're missing, like you're saying, the pillars, the foundation. And, I think concurrent with that too is the stress of, well, I
Yes.
need this protocol or I need this test or I
Hmm.
need to go here and there and do all these wild
Yes.
things. I'm such a proponent for talking about stress and exploring stress because I have a background in mental health and
Hmm.
because of obviously how much stress plays a role in our health, so the
Yeah.
inadvertent stress that you're causing trying to do all the things is
Yes.
is counterproductive, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's something like as well that I'm really passionate about is talking about, when we're looking at topics within the holistic health field, like food or nutrition
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it is. Like a lot of the times it causes so much more stress than
Sure.
good. And it's
Yeah.
like kind of like I think back to the beginning of my healing journey, and I was so focused, like zeroed in on like what I was eating. So like I couldn't go out to eat with people
Mm-hmm.
because like God forbid I have, a salad that uses a dressing that has canola oil or something like
Sure.
that. Or like going on vacation and packing like a whole entire carry-on of like food, stuff like that. And I think that that mindset around food is so restrictive. And when it
Totally.
comes to like healing, I feel like the worst thing you can do is make your life smaller and not
Yeah.
bigger. And
Yeah.
that's like kind of what I realized too, and was such a pivotal point for me was that I had spent so many years making my life so small. I had so many
Sure.
restrictions on what I could do, what I could eat, where I could go, all of those things in the name of health. And at the end of the day, like how's that better than just being
Yeah.
chronically sick? Because if you can't go out to dinner with your family or your boyfriend or whatever it is
Sure.
and just enjoy it, like what's the point? Like where's
Right.
the
Yeah.
where's the fun? Like what are you getting back from
Yeah.
like healing? And for me, like addressing the stress in my life and figuring out like as a very high strung individual, how do I take a step back and how do I modulate and mitigate the
Yeah.
stress that I'm experiencing that my body can't handle with something else? And how can that help kind of instead of, again, making my life smaller, make my life bigger and expand my life in a way that is both healthy but also just fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I so appreciate that. And I take notice of that when you're sharing on social media about when you travel and the types of food that you eat. And there was someone who had DM'd you about something in Starbucks a couple months ago. I forget what it was. And someone made a
Yeah.
comment about something, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About the sugar, maybe. Are you making a suggestion about not having so much sugar, maybe first thing?
Mhm.
I don't know. I really appreciate because that resonates with me so much. And that's such a big part of my philosophy is, if you cannot go out to dinner and be present and be in the moment with the people that you love and
Yeah.
there's so many health experts that promote and Mark Hyman is one who is always talking about community and
Hmm.
being with those that you love and how valuable it is. And I think we learned a lot about that through the pandemic and social isolation
Yeah.
and the health repercussions of that and so forth. But that is so, so, so important. I think that's that all
Hmm.
or nothing thinking of I have to be super restrictive and rigid and I can't miss a day and whatever,
Yeah.
fill in the blank,
Yeah.
right? Whatever language people choose to use there.
Yeah.
And that is inhibitory, hands down, on making progress, sustainability, and
Yes.
stressful in and of itself.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people kind of get stuck in that cycle. And I do think there's a pattern. Like, I think a lot of people get stuck in that and eventually they do come out of it. Like,
Mm,
they realize, this isn't actually that beneficial. But I do think still, like, that's why all the time. And with the Starbucks thing, that was a good example. I feel like as an herbalist and like someone who's been in the health and wellness field for so long, I feel like I'm so balanced when it
mm,
comes to
mhm.
like my views. Like I'm not anti-sugar, I'm not
Sure.
anti-Starbucks or whatever. I just shared simply that I notice in my town where I live, having a venti frappuccino is a common thing. And the baristas at Starbucks, like I'm friends with some of them because I see them a lot and they say that like, yeah, it is. It's just like something people get. It's not like just a sweet treat here and
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And that post that I said, like, it's like 70 grams of sugar, got so much pushback. And I was like, do you even follow my account? Like,
Mhm,
I feel
mhm.
like compared to a lot of other people in the space, like I'm so middle ground when it comes to things
Yes,
like that
sure.
because I've seen firsthand in my life that like at the end of the day, nutrition matters. It
Yeah,
does. Like we should be nourishing our bodies every single day. But the biggest thing for me with every single thing that I was dealing with health wise wasn't so much nutrition, actually. It was more so kind of like the mental side of things. Like
sure. Yeah,
um, just I think what you mentioned in itself, community was one piece that I think is so important. Like being in healthy friendships, healthy
yeah,
relationships,
sure.
having like just kind of like people that you can sit around the table with and laugh and converse and all that all those types of things is so important. And I think too, one of the things that I've like studied over the years and one of the many kind of like diets or whatever I tried was the Mediterranean diet because
Mm,
I
hmm.
read about blue zones
Sure.
and all of those like optimal markers. And
Hmm.
even after doing that, I think I still come back to the fact that those communities, all of the communities that fall under the blue zones are so community oriented. They're
Yes.
all about being with each other and having communion and that type of thing. And they're not like, because people will say like, oh, well, what about these? Like they drink like a glass of wine a day or two glasses
Yeah,
of wine, but we know that's not good. And I think that's just a good example of how much community and your mental space and that side of things impacts like your
yeah,
body overall. Because like I think we stress about those kind of like minute food things so
sure.
much when at least for me, that side of things was the best thing that I ever did for my health.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. And I think, like what you're saying, the mental piece of it and that mindset shift, this is a big issue that I see
Hmm.
that we've just culturally, I think, have been indoctrinated by this diet culture, this rigidity, I'm on a diet. So it has to
Yeah.
be this truncated amount of time and I have to eat X amount of
Mhm.
calories and I have to do, this, that, and the other thing. But when
Yeah.
you really start to transform your mentality and see it as a lifestyle, see it for the long term and infuse all of it with balance, you are able to find success and to find healing in
Hmm.
that because you're relinquishing all the pressure of I need to be perfect.
Yeah.
I need to hit every piece of this,
Hmm.
process. And it's just not realistic. It's just not going to happen. And so I'm glad that you said that,
Wow.
with the blue zone piece of, being in community. And I think what you're saying about the wine, I know when it comes to heart health and so forth, that's
Hmm.
one of the pillars of reducing your
Yeah.
likelihood of a heart attack is to enjoy an alcoholic beverage with friends is
Yeah.
what's outlined, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that is because you're being with people and you're,
Mhm.
decompressing and you're being present and you're appreciating that
Yeah.
critical part. We're social beings, so depriving yourself of that
Yeah.
or detaching yourself or putting space between you and that. I mean, inevitably, it's not just going to impact your mental health, it's going to have profound impact on your physical health. And obviously, we know that they're connected. So I'm
Hmm.
really grateful that we were able to touch on this because it's such a backwards
Yeah.
mindset. And once we move past
Yeah.
that, I think people can have a lot more success.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I saw it firsthand with myself, and I've seen it with a lot of like my close friends that have dealt with, hormone health issues too, where just I think as humans, we tend to gravitate towards like the diets and things like
Mm,
that because it's something that you can really easily control,
sure.
but we become too controlling over it, I
Yes.
think, and that's where it becomes more negative than positive. And I think
Totally.
like when I started a gluten-free, dairy-free lifestyle when I was in high school because of just at the time, like that's what doctors were recommending, that's what the protocols I was reading about. And I'm not sure it really helped me or
Mm,
hurt me. I did it for another like 4 years after high school until I realized like, I think I can do this without
yeah.
really limiting what food I'm eating because like I want to try attempt this. And I
Sure.
think with kind of getting rid of like the labels around the
Yeah.
diet and the restrictions around the diet and just focusing on food that just made me feel
Feel good.
good
Yeah.
was super helpful because even now like I don't consume like a lot of like health foods. I don't eat a lot of kale. I don't eat a ton of salads or like just like that realm of things.
Sure.
When I was in high school, that's like all I was eating. I was
Yeah.
eating
Yeah.
like so many wheatgrass shots a day and just focusing on things that like we kind of perceive as healthy
Yeah.
versus what actually makes my body feel good,
Sure. Yeah.
which is why like I think too, I'm just trying to like over exaggerate all the time that like you should really do what works for
For
you.
you. Yeah.
It's like biologically, we're all very similar, but we're also very different.
Yeah.
I just did genetic testing
Okay.
through a friend. It's called Designer Genes Co. And it was so interesting to see like what came back
Sure.
as like the gene expression. And when it comes to genes, like obviously people have different beliefs around them, but I think that like your environment really affects how they show up and you can kind of turn them like on and off depending on the environment. And I feel like with the genetic testing, I saw that like my body really processes carbs super well and it doesn't process a certain property that's in like vegetables, like the conifer the
Cruciferous.
green
Yeah.
vegetables. Yeah. Um, oh my gosh, I'm tired this morning, but yeah, it was interesting to see because I've seen that play out in my life like
Yeah.
over the last 10 years. So that's why I'm like, okay, at the end of the day, we know what's good for us, like food wise, but you
Sure.
should really just be purposeful and
Yeah.
finding out what works for you, not what works for, your favorite influencer or your favorite doctor or whatever it
Sure.
is, but really just like what makes you feel good. Because that
Yeah.
was another turning point for me in my health journey was looking at it on an individual standpoint and not so much just focusing on what other people were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And I think that's the best guide is tuning into what helps you feel good. Because even if you're eating the stereotypical healthy food and you don't
Yeah.
feel good, then
Yeah.
what's the point there? And that's where that bio-individuality piece comes in. And
Mhm.
I think as human beings, and maybe just as Americans, I don't know, but as human beings, I think the thought of that is very intimidating because
Yeah.
I want someone to tell me what I should be
Mhm.
eating, and I want
Yeah.
guidelines, and I want to know if I'm doing it right or if I'm doing it wrong. And so
Yeah.
you saying do it is best for you and really promoting that, you know, as much as I 110% believe that to be true, and that's a big part of how I navigate my work with clients, I think
Mhm.
it is very daunting to people because people don't know
Yeah.
themselves. They don't tune into
Mhm.
their bodies. We're not taught this. No one is
Yeah.
educating us on, building that self-awareness. And so the thought of that is just scary for people. And I think that's part of the
Mhm.
reason why we kind of abandoned ship, and
Yeah.
we were like, well, this diet it tells me what I should be eating and it worked for so and so. And so
Mhm.
I'm going to give it a go. And then I think we kind of go in this yo-yo dieting cycle. And, you've
Yeah.
been there, I've been there. I think everyone has
Mhm.
been there. And luckily we've graduated out of that. And, now we
Yeah.
tune into our bodies and have that awareness. But that's the key. I mean, awareness is the key to self-transformation. I believe
Yeah.
that through and through. And I think if we were to infuse our nutritional choices with a little bit more or a lot of bit more awareness, I think
Mhm.
it would completely change the game.
Yeah, and that's how I think too, like for people who are kind of on these journeys, I think it's great to have resources like you and what you do because it is like so individualized. And I think
Sure.
that, I mean, there are a lot of um RDs, coaches, like whoever just works in the nutrition space that don't really follow those individualized protocols. So you do have to be careful like who you're working with.
Sure.
But when you get someone that really has that belief that like, you're an individual and we're going to address it that way, like that
Yeah.
can be a real ticket for success for people. So I really appreciate like what you do and how you work with other people and that just that as a resource because
Sure.
I feel like when I started off on this journey, like 10 plus years ago now, there weren't many people that were doing that. Like I had some access to nutrition professionals, but it was all kind of like textbook stuff.
Yeah.
So to have now a space where people are viewing nutrition more holistically and
Yeah.
individually is, I think, really good progress that we've seen.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that so much. I think a lot of it comes from my background being a therapist formerly
Mhm.
and knowing how individual our experiences are in that regard and that
Yeah.
dictating who we are
Mhm.
now. I think looking at through the same lens of physical health
Yeah.
is so important, because my experience as a child having trauma or going through,
Mhm.
just the environment I was raised in and whatnot, inevitably that's going to manifest in the way we operate as human beings.
Yeah.
So I think, to do that in the same way with nutrition and movement and sleep and so forth, I think that is imperative.
Yeah, and I think so funny. I was talking to my sister like a few months back about
Mhm.
how I think that part of the requirement for like if you're becoming an RD or a doctor or anything certification wise too, like you should really have there should be a psychology piece to it
Yeah,
because I think, and you probably can speak to this a ton, but one of the things I learned too that was very pivotal in my health journey was how much, like you mentioned, childhood trauma
Oh,
affects your health
yeah.
as an adult. Yeah. And
Mhm.
I think like a lot of people hear that, the word like childhood trauma, and they think like, oh my gosh, like it has to be something so severe. Like
Sure.
you traditionally think of like abuse or something
Yeah.
like that, but really just how you're raised like shapes your mental
Yeah.
landscape. And that has an impact on your risk for chronic health issues, your risk for autoimmune diseases arising, your risk for like hormone health issues arising.
Sure.
And for me, that was one thing that really like changed the game for me was when I went
Yeah.
through like EMDR therapy.
Love
And
that.
yeah, it really just helped kind of rewire my brain
Sure.
around different experiences I had as a kid and how that kind of translated to being an adult and how that impacted just even like things like day-to-day stress.
Sure. Yeah.
And so going through that kind of like transformative therapy really helped get my body to a place of healing. I think
Yeah.
like that was kind of like the last puzzle piece for me that really just solidified the fact that I haven't had, any flares in the
Yeah.
last, I think it's been like no, 5 years now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so I try to like emphasize that a lot with people too, is there's such a psychological component
Oh, yes.
to healing and
Mhm.
to being sick. And it's not so much like, oh, it's all in your head, which
Yeah.
is, what a lot of women tend to get in doctors' offices is like, just don't stress so much. It's
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
occurring in your head. Like, no, it's deeper than that. Like
Hmm.
this is
Hmm.
this is intertwined in your HPA axis, and we need to figure out how to get that functioning again.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really cool that that's your background. And I feel like I'm always saying to like people like there should be more of a component when it comes to nutrition or even just being a doctor. Like they don't get enough education
Yeah.
in how much your mental landscape plays a role in all like aspects of.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I'm so grateful that you mentioned that just adverse childhood experiences and trauma
Mhm.
in childhood. And like you said, it's more than just abuse and neglect. It can be having
Yeah.
alcoholic parents. It could be having, bullying as a child, right? Like there's a number
Mhm.
of different little t and big T
Yeah.
considerations to be made. And that is probably the most challenging part to address, not only because there continues to be a stigma, right, around mental health.
Yeah.
And it's much more than just eat this or move your body or sleep
Yeah.
more, right? It takes
Hmm.
serious work. And you probably, can speak to that is going through EMDR and how intense that can be and what
Yeah.
that requires of you and the commitment that's there. So yeah, I'm so grateful because I do continue to see research continue to emerge. I know the one author, Gabor Mate,
Oh yeah.
I think you're familiar maybe with one
Hmm.
of his books. He talks a lot about that, about
Yeah.
how these experiences in childhood and the influence that they have on autoimmune development and not so much
Hmm.
just depression, anxiety, and so forth. It spans
Yeah.
all areas of disease, and
Hmm.
how important it is for us to be willing to confront those areas of our childhoods or adolescence and so forth in order to relinquish, to heal, and to process that trauma so that it doesn't
Yeah.
manifest. Trauma lives in the body.
Yeah.
So I
Hmm.
think it makes sense that dysfunction can arise as a result of that, you know?
Yeah, and I think that also kind of falls under what we were talking about earlier with community and how if we see like obviously during developmental years with children, your outside world is going to impact you so much. But
Sure.
I think even as adults, when we have, depending on how our community is, it's obviously going to affect us positively or negatively. And I think that it's a good kind of just general reminder of how important it is of what you're doing, who you're surrounding yourself with, that type of thing. And just addressing like underlying issues that you haven't can
Sure.
really like lead to breakthrough for you. I think
Mm-hmm.
that even with, I remember one of the ACE like related tests was through Kaiser, and they looked at not like autoimmune stuff, but they looked at like causes leading of causes of death in
Okay.
humans in the US, and a lot of those, even things like heart attacks and heart failure and those types of things, those were tied exponentially to people
Mhm.
who had higher scores on
Basis.
their
Yeah.
ACE test. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like I'm always telling this to people, no matter if they're my age or way older. Like a close family friend was dealing with blood pressure issues, and I was like, you should take the ACEs test.
Yes.
You
Yes.
should
It should
check
be
this out and
required.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they couldn't get to like a root cause of what was causing
Okay.
it. I was like, it's worth a try. Like, it's worth a
Yes.
try.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just general knowledge that we should all be aware of. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with the book, and this is for anyone who's interested, The Deepest Well by Nadine
Hmm.
Burke-Harris. I mean, that book,
Yeah.
wild, learning about the progression of understanding ACEs and how it came to be
Hmm.
and whatnot. And, just that alone and the correlations that are made between higher ACE scores and health outcomes and so forth, there's just no
Hmm.
denying the connection. And so the
Yeah.
fact that this is not understood or not utilized more frequently just for people to understand, yeah, this happened in my life and this can have an
Yeah.
impact. Maybe I could do something about it. I think that should just be something that we all just have access to, or I mean, we all have
Yeah.
access to it, but we're not aware of the relevance, the importance, and
Yeah.
it's the problem, you know?
Yeah. But I think it's one of the things that's beneficial about social media is conversations like this tend
Hmm.
to spread.
Hmm.
Like, I feel like one person starts talking about it and then a few, and then like
Yeah,
it spreads like wildfire. And I feel like that's one of the topics I'm seeing more common right now
sure.
because I feel like social media is obsessed with like cortisol health. So as a result, people are
Yes.
talking about this. Um, which is, I mean, it's great because I think it is showing more people like if you've done so many things and you feel like you're doing all the things, like maybe this is a missing puzzle piece for
Yeah,
you.
sure. Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I think the conversation, tends to be obsessive, but for good reason, because
Yeah.
stress in and of
Yeah.
itself, traumatic stress, chronic stress, acute stress, whatever the case is, it's a conversation that needs to happen, especially in our world today and what's going on
Yeah.
economically, internationally. I mean, so many factors out of
Yeah.
our control. So I want to transition a little, Lindsay, now just to
Okay.
talking about Simbi and
Mhm.
creation of the company, founding the
Yeah.
company, and what types of products you're offering to your consumers.
Yeah. So Simbi was not a plan that I had. I wasn't planning to launch a D2C company. At the time, I had started my career. I worked in political policy for a bit. And then, due to being like, too sick, I had to move home with my parents from DC. And I basically was just trying to figure out, like, what can I do from home or what can I do that, will allow me to make a sustainable income um, as a really sick person.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had been freelance writing since I was in high school,
Okay.
and I kind of realized like there was a whole field to get into there. So prior to Simbi, I had been just basically working on SEO for 2 years, working with brands in the health and wellness space.
Neat.
And I had started my Instagram account, Wellness with Lens, when I was 20, I think. So that's 8 years ago now.
Wow.
And it was basically just a place for me to like post gluten-free recipes and look for gluten-free recipes because at the time it wasn't as popular.
Sure.
Um, yeah, and so a few years later, like a few years into doing both those things, my sister had been like nagging me to join TikTok because she's like 6 years younger than me. And I was like,
Yeah,
I can't do it. Like, I'm like not a natural social media persona type of person. Like I'm
sure.
a very introverted, like mind my own business, don't share any of my business with anyone
Yeah,
type of
yeah,
person.
yeah.
Like I cannot get on this app. Like first of all, it's a bunch of teenagers dancing and that freaks me out. Um, and she was like, "No, you don't have to do that. Like just post about your herbs." She was like, "I swear it's gonna do well." Like there's just with Instagram I hadn't like I was doing well but I hadn't like really gained that much traction and so I
Okay.
was like okay fine like I guess I'll join this like
Yeah,
I had been working on my own personal blog and that had been getting traction so I was like okay this will be a way to get people to my blog
yeah.
and the first post that I like shared on TikTok went viral and then like
Okay.
the second the third the fourth they all went viral and it was all around herbalism, which I
Yeah,
had kind of shared a little bit about on my Instagram and my blog, but I mainly focused on recipes, like food recipes, versus on TikTok, I was talking about herbal recipes.
sure.
And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll just keep sharing. Like, this is fun. I love talking about herbs,
Yeah.
and I feel comfortable talking about that. And I posted a video basically just making what is now our liver support tea
Okay.
and talking about my dad's story with it. And it got like 10 million
Oh
views.
my goodness.
And
Okay.
I had thousands of DMs, emails, like everything was just inundated with responses saying, "Hey, can you sell this tea?" Despite the fact that I like
Wow.
shared the recipe for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, maybe I guess like I'll do this. And it basically just took off from there.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't know what would happen with it. I kind of just thought it would be more of like a hobby business.
Okay.
But 4 months later, we kind of soft launched with just like like just brown bag packaging I got at the
Yeah.
store. Like I printed labels at Staples and just like cut them up,
Yeah.
and it just took off. And so
Okay.
we started with liver support tea, cycle harmony for hormone support, and then anxiety for anxiety support.
Yeah.
And now we have 10 full-time blends. We have herbal tinctures too, and we just launched our first herbal capsule last month for blood sugar support, and we have our second coming this coming month.
Okay.
But yeah, it's been so much fun. I work like my right hand girl is my
Hmm.
sister. So we basically just work together every day, all day. And it's been just a really fun experience to build this company
Yes.
together.
Sure.
And we have an all-women team, which is
Okay.
amazing.
Very cool.
It's so much fun to be in an office with just girls.
Yeah.
I don't know. The vibes are just different. Like you can go
Yes.
into work wearing whatever you want. You don't
Hmm.
have to like wear a bra. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But it's been fun to build, and we are really diving into. We have our 10 T's that are pretty foundational, and going forward, we're focusing a lot on tinctures and capsules. Everything is herbal based. So
Yeah.
um, everything is like our tinctures and our capsules. It's basically just comprehensive blends of herbs.
Okay.
We aren't going to like branch into anything further than that. I want to
Yeah.
stick to herbs because that's what I know and that's what I love. And
Yeah.
I think it's just like tea is an easy way to get people into the herbalism world. I feel like it's
Sure.
kind of like a gateway drug where it's like if I can get you in just by drinking an herbal tea, like it's really going to change your life. And
Sure.
that's what I find with Simbi. And my favorite thing to hear is when people are like, oh, well, I'm making my own tea, or I'm
Yeah.
doing like, I just started an herbalism class. Like, I get messages all the time. And I just think it's fantastic because tea traditionally is something that a lot of people drink. It
Yeah.
usually isn't, loose leaf, but at least it's something that people are familiar with. So it
Sure.
gets them into
Yeah.
business, then they learn more about herbalism and the different herbs that we use in the blends and why we use them. And it tends to pique interest a lot in learning more. So that's like kind of, it's just like foundational to the company is trying to, create a ton of herbalists essentially,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
from using our products.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So, out of my own curiosity, is it considered a supplement or is it considered a food? Like, what are the kind of the steps that you had to take to, and you don't have to get too detailed or anything. I just, curious because if it's considered a supplement, how does that work in terms of being able to sell a product? If that question makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, so our teas are considered food. They're still
Okay.
considered just tea, like when we're filing like our import paperwork and stuff like that from overseas, like it goes they file under teas. We are currently just online, but we starting this spring are gonna branch into some retailers. And with them, yeah, it's been an interesting conversation because our teas, while they're teas, they're also, like you said, kind of like supplements because they
Yeah,
have similar goals to supplements.
sure.
But we're really focusing on the fact that they're just teas.
Okay.
But then like when it comes to our tinctures or our capsules, those are like filed under supplements.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was just curious because when you really think about it, like they're having the impact on the body that can be quote unquote medicinal in nature,
Mhm.
right? But they're also, like you're saying, they're tea, so it's kind of like, oh, well,
Yeah.
just that line.
Yeah, and it was also like it's been a lengthy internal conversation we've had as well, like just with especially talking to like now that we're talking with retailers and trying to figure out like shelving wise and where we would go. And even we're working on a packaging rebrand right now. And even for that, it was like, okay, how do we approach this? Because like
Ah,
we're not the same as a loose leaf tea that's like for like if you go to the grocery store and you're looking at like a raspberry leaf loose leaf tea, that's very different for, I mean, sorry, a tea bag. It's very
Yeah.
different from our loose leaf tea. Because they're just more medicinal. So
Sure.
it's hard because that is kind of like a conundrum with like where it should be placed, how we should even go about like packaging it. Um, and moving forward from there. But we really did just ultimately come to the conclusion like it is tea
Yeah.
and it should be like placed as such.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very interesting. So, what should someone know who maybe is just getting started in the world of like plant medicine, herbalism, like any first steps, that someone should consider moving into that whole world?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things. One, herbs are still something that like should be thought of similar to medicine. I
Sure.
think that one of the things like with social media that's hard is trying to figure out how to communicate how powerful herbs are and how much they can help you with things, but also at the same time, like you should kind of always have a disclaimer that you shouldn't just take the herbs without doing any background research, or you shouldn't just take new herbs without thinking like, okay, am I taking any medicine? Are there any
Yeah,
interactions,
right.
stuff like that?
Yeah.
Um, a lot of like our teas, I tried to make them powerful, but still more soothing and not that aggressive. Like that's
Okay.
like a huge thing behind each tea blend is making sure the tea blend is soothing and not aggressive because that can easily happen when you're dealing with herbs. So just kind of like figuring out that side of things first, really learning about herbs before you start experimenting yourself. Like I'm not talking like taking your own herbalism class, but if you're gonna try to make a tea, like one thing that can be really useful is there's a lot of great books out there that will have recipes in the book. And that's kind of how I originally started was just following the recipes in the books and then like continuing education from there.
Sure.
So I would suggest, starting with some fantastic books, testing out those recipes, and a lot of the books also include like sections on herbal safety and herbal
Mm.
safety protocols and stuff like that, which can be really helpful. So I think that's like a really good place to start.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. I think that that's important because similar to the question I just asked about, kind of knowing the difference, there
Mhm.
is, some caution that should be taken when integrating
Yeah.
something like this and not going about it frivolously and understanding what it is that you're putting in your body because, you know,
Hmm.
it does have the power to be impactful in a way that goes beyond just having yourself a cup of black tea. Like
Yeah.
there can be more to it, not with, not to have fear involved, right? But
Yeah.
simply
Yeah.
just to be informed as you would like any type of supplement or integrating something
Hmm.
new, you want to be aware of that.
Yes, and I think that too, just being cognizant of where you're buying from is important too. I always stress the importance of buying organic herbs, especially if it's a tea blend, just because you don't want to be doing more harm to your body by
Yeah.
consuming, like, say, herbs that are sprayed with pesticides or something like that. And I do
Sure.
think that I am seeing an increase in like kind of especially just on TikTok, like tea shops. And I think that's so fantastic. I love seeing more companies emerging, but for the most part, they're not sourcing organic herbs.
Mm.
So I just think that that's something to be cognizant of as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree with that. Being aware of where it's coming from and how it's being treated and grown and so forth.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I'd be curious to hear just a few non-negotiables that
Mhm.
you would consider as being really important parts of your wellness routine, even if it's not considered a wellness routine, just your day
Yeah.
to day. What are some things that you do hands down has to happen?
Okay, so there's a few things. I'm not like super neurotic about daily negotiables, but there are a few that like I can't really like live without.
Okay.
The first thing, I'm just thinking in order of my day,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
the first thing I'm really big on oral hygiene.
Okay.
Um, just having like I don't think that's a field that I think is kind of emerging and will continue to become more popular is like how much your oral health plays a role on your whole
Sure.
physical health as well. And like for me, I used to deal with like tonsillitis a ton. So that's how I got into learning about that side of things. But one thing that I literally cannot live without is my tongue scraper,
Okay. Yeah.
which I feel like it's one of those things that like once you start doing it, it's impossible to go back.
Sure.
That that's like, yeah, I have to start my day with that every day. I'm a big no coffee before breakfast person. I know that
Okay.
that's also a really popular topic on social media right now. I think too, it for me, I'm not super sensitive to caffeine, but I just noticed that energy wise throughout the day, if I start with like a breakfast instead of starting with caffeine, I feel a lot better.
Sure.
I also spend a lot of time outside, and that's something as a business founder and like someone who has the potential to be booked and over busy 24/7,
Yeah. Yeah.
making that priority is important for me.
Mhm.
I feel like it's one of the things that grounds me. And going back to our chat on nervous system health and stress
Sure.
type of thing, it's made a huge difference in my life. Just, I have a dog too, so that
Yeah.
helps because he needs to be walked
I
outside.
relate. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So that's been great. I think that tea is something that I can't like live without. And I think that um I love tea because it's not like a super aggressive supplement, but
Sure.
it keeps my health so consistent.
Love that.
I feel like I experimented 2 months ago and I took a month off from drinking tea just to see how it was. And it was not good. I did not feel good. I didn't feel energetic. I didn't feel hydrated. I
Yeah.
didn't feel like mentally I felt foggy. Like
Wow.
my allergies came back because I drank like
Yeah.
allergy tea. But that's another one. I drink 3 to 5 cups of tea a day usually.
Okay.
Um, hmm, let's see, anything else?
Yeah.
Uh, I think a big one for me is spending time with someone every
Yeah.
day that really makes me feel good. Like I said, I work with my sister, so that's nice because it's like we're together most of the day, and then
Sure.
also like having dinner with my husband or our family who are here, like that's an important piece for me to make sure I have going. And then every single night I do probably like the most like wellnessy, like non-negotiable is I do red light therapy on my
Okay.
face, like the face mask, while I do acupressure on the
Yeah. Yeah.
sauna
Okay.
mat. And I usually listen to a meditation at the same time.
Okay. Very
So that's
wellnessy.
Yes, it's very wellnessy. Like I feel like it's probably the most wellness thing I do,
Okay. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. But it makes a difference. Like the acupressure mat is so good for nervous system health. It's great if you're inclined towards chronic pain. The red light therapy mask, I have no idea. I feel like it makes me feel like a little bit more tired and like helps
Okay.
wind down my body.
Yeah.
Skin wise, like I have no idea. We will have to check back in like 10 years because that's like what
10 years.
it's
Yeah.
longevity wise.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
we'll
mhm.
see. And then I think that's it.
Okay.
That's pretty much what I rely on every single day.
Yeah. But what it sounds like is it's all so realistic. And
Mhm.
when you were speaking about being outside, that kind of brought me back to what we were saying about those foundational pieces and how
Yes.
valuable it is to simply be in nature, get some sunshine, ground yourself, listen to the birds. I mean, all of these things that come along with just simply being outside, which so many of us are robbed of or don't
Mhm.
prioritize,
Yeah.
but it's such a simple thing for us to do. And clearly you're speaking to
Yeah.
the value it's brought you, but just in general, I think something like that, if we're sitting at a desk all day or we're,
Yes.
you know, at the office before the sun comes up and we leave after the sun goes down,
Yeah.
all of these factors, we don't realize how much of an influence they're having on our health and just making small, priorities throughout the day to get outside or go for a short walk or something of that nature. The impact influence it can have is so significant.
Yes, definitely. And I think too, with those habits, like finding ones that work for you
Yeah.
again is important because you don't want to like get another category that you're putting yourself into a box for. So I
Yeah.
think like I've found what really works for me in regards to walking and nature and that type
Yes.
of thing, but it's going to look different for everyone. But I
Totally.
do think foundationally, nature, getting back to nature and getting closer to nature is really important.
Yes. Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Lindsay, this has been so lovely. I appreciate you so much for taking time out of your day
Yeah,
to
of
have this
course.
conversation. I've been following you for years and I've really admired, your work and your journey is very inspiring. So
Thank you.
it's been such a pleasure and I know the audience will love it as well. And I just can't wait to continue to see what happens with Simbi and your life and so forth and following along.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a
Yeah.
lot of fun chatting.
Great. So thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you. I hope that you will tune in next time. And in the meantime, be well.